Jackson Hale was the man who never entered a room unnoticed. He carried himself like a star athlete trotting onto the field, head high, eyes scanning for applause. His stride was a measured prowl, and wherever he went, conversations slowed, people turned, even if only to glare at the audacity of his confidence. At 43, he was in his prime, hair silvered just enough to look distinguished, a sculpted jaw softened only by the faintest crow's feet from smiling too wide. His skin was bronze from tennis weekends in Malibu, and his suits were tailored in a small shop in Milan, whose owner addressed him as Signore Hale in reverent tones. The penthouse he owned spanned half the top floor of the Apex Tower, a spire of glass and steel that sliced the Los Angeles skyline. At night, the view glowed like circuitry, a million orange, red, and white lights pulsing far below his windows. In the evenings, he liked to stand on the balcony, swirling scotch in a crystal glass, his reflection merging with the cityscape behind him. A king surveying his empire. But Jackson didn't just love his success. He needed people to know it. He dropped brand names in casual conversation. He spoke of private equity guys as if they were cousins. He'd slip into stories details like the precise vintage of the champagne he'd poured on the deck of a yacht in Cannes. People either adored him or despised him. There was rarely an in-between. Meanwhile, Caleb Hale, his younger brother by 4 years, lived a life so different it sometimes felt as though the universe was conducting an elaborate social experiment. Caleb taught American history and government at Willow Creek High School, a small but respected public school in the sleepy town an hour outside Los Angeles. He rode a sturdy green bicycle to school each day, its paint chipped in places, the handlebar tape a little ragged. His usual uniform was khakis and a rotating set of button-down shirts with sleeves rolled up past the elbows. In winter, he wore corduroy jackets with worn elbows that smelled faintly of chalk dust. His home, a modest craftsman, sat on a street where kids played basketball in driveways and neighbors waved from front lawns. White trim framed deep green clapboard siding. A wind chime tickled softly by the porch, and an ancient oak tree cast dappled shadows on the steps. It was quiet, peaceful, and entirely free of Bentleys. Yet for all their differences, the brothers shared one essential feature: intelligence. Both were whip-smart in school, but Jackson wielded his intelligence like a blade, carving paths through obstacles, while Caleb wore his like a warm coat, sheltering those around him. Their parents had known it too. Their mother, a literature teacher with soft hands and a talent for folding origami cranes, once said, "Jackson will conquer the world. Caleb will save it." It was a line they'd both remember, though for entirely different reasons. When their mother died, the differences between them became stark as ink on white paper. Caleb stayed by her hospital bed day and night, holding her frail hand, murmuring poetry and prayers as the monitors ticked out the final chapters of her life. He organized the funeral, ordered lilies for the altar, and delivered a eulogy so moving that half the small town left the church in tears. Jackson arrived halfway through the service, a crisp suit barely wrinkled from his private jet flight, his sunglasses tucked into the pocket of his suit jacket like an afterthought. He swept in with a cloud of expensive cologne, offered polite condolences, then held court outside the church steps, recounting tales of business deals and celebrity parties to distant cousins who barely knew him. It had always been that way. Chapter 2: The Invitation. On a Wednesday evening in October, Caleb sat in his small study grading papers. A single desk lamp spilled warm yellow light over piles of essays. On the wall behind him hung a map of the original 13 colonies, its edges yellowed with age. Books leaned in messy stacks along the baseboards, everything from biographies of Lincoln to dog-eared chess manuals. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the window. His phone buzzed beside a half-drunk cup of chamomile tea. He picked it up, frowning slightly as he saw the sender. Jackson. The text was pure Jackson. "Poker game this weekend. My place in Vegas. Big boys only. You in?" Caleb blinked at the glowing screen. He hadn't spoken to Jackson in months, not since their last fight over dinner at a restaurant in LA. It had ended with Caleb throwing cash on the table, storming out into a downpour, and Jackson yelling after him that he was a small-town nobody, destined to die obscure. Part of Caleb wanted to delete the text, pretend he'd never seen it. But another part of him, the part that still felt the blood tie like a steel cable between them, couldn't leave it unanswered. He typed 3 words and hit send. "I'll be there." Chapter 3, The Table. Jackson's suite at the Bellagio was a palace carved from velvet and gold. The air smelled faintly of expensive cigars and polished wood. Chandeliers blazed overhead like suns caught in crystal. Heavy drapes, the color of ripe cherries, framed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Strip, neon lights blinking in 1,000 colors. In the center of the suite sat a custom-built poker table. Black leather rails gleamed under the light. Gold inlays shimmered along the edges. Around it lounged 5 men. One was Nate Corbin, who'd been captain of the lacrosse team back at St. Ignatius Prep. Nate wore a Rolex thick as a manacle and grinned like a shark. Another was Darius, a venture capitalist who spoke in cryptic references to seed rounds and unicorn valuations. A third was Damon, a retired NBA power forward whose diamond earring flashed with every turn of his head. All wore suits or crisp designer shirts. All exuded the comfortable arrogance of men who believed the world owed them its spoils. Caleb entered wearing a plain navy jacket and a pair of loafers polished so often the seams had faded to pale threads. Nate looked up and laughed. "Holy shit, hail the brain? Still lecturing about dead presidents?" Caleb smiled faintly. "Dead kings too, I've expanded." Jackson emerged from behind a velvet curtain like an actor entering stage right. "Caleb, you made it, brother." He pulled Caleb into a hug so forceful it left Caleb's glasses askew. Jackson smelled of citrus cologne and expensive scotch. "Glad you made it. Try not to let the buy-in scare you." Caleb straightened his glasses and looked him dead in the eyes. "I've got enough saved to lose. Let's see if you can say the same." For a heartbeat, Jackson's grin faltered. Then he threw his head back and laughed. The game cards shuffled. Chips clicked like insect wings. Laughter rose and fell in waves. Caleb played tight, folded weak hands, watched, studied Jackson's small movements, the tap of fingers, the way he sipped his scotch after a bluff. One by one, the others fell away. Nate threw up his hands and stalked off, muttering about bad luck. Darius pretended a call from Singapore investors required him to leave. Damon shook Caleb's hand, clapped him on the back, and retreated to the bar. By midnight, only Jackson and Caleb remained. Silence settled over the suite, broken only by the soft slap of cards on felt. Jackson leaned forward. His eyes glittered under the chandelier light. "Let's go big." Caleb frowned. "Define big." "Your house," Jackson said, his voice casual as discussing the weather. "Against my Miami property. One hand, winner takes all." The final hand. Caleb stared at him. "You're serious?" Jackson drummed his fingers on the table. "Scared?" Caleb exhaled a shaky breath. "No, just sad it came to this." They scribbled a contract on a hotel napkin. Nate, lingering by the bar, served as witness. Cards were dealt. Jackson barely glanced at his hand. He lounged back in his chair, swirling his drink. Caleb peeked. A 7 of clubs, a 2 of diamonds, the worst possible starting hand in Texas Hold'em. But Jackson's eyes shone with a triumphant gleam that arrived a moment too early. "Bluff," Caleb called. Raised. Jackson raised again. The pot grew enormous, a shimmering mountain of chips reflecting gold and ruby light. "All in," Caleb said. Jackson flashed a predator's smile. "Call." He flipped his cards. A flush in diamonds. Gasps exploded around the room. Caleb laid down his lowly pair of 8s. Jackson sprang to his feet, arms spread wide like wings. "And that's how it's done." Caleb cleared his throat. "1 second. He held up his phone. "Replay the feed." Chapter 4, Aftermath. On the video, Jackson's sleight of hand was clear. A card slipped from his sleeve into the shuffle. Darius cursed. Nate muttered, "Jesus, man." Security arrived. Jackson ranted, screamed, accused Caleb of hacking the cameras. By dawn, whispers had already spread. By Monday, a grainy clip of Jackson's trick appeared on a finance gossip site under the headline, "Real estate tycoon Jackson Hale caught cheating at Vegas poker game." Investors pulled out. A Miami development evaporated. Old friends stopped returning calls. Caleb returned home. He taught the Magna Carta on Tuesday. His student, Maria Gonzalez, aced her final exam. Caleb beamed, gave her a fist bump. Real wins. Chapter 5. Closure. On a warm June evening, Jackson arrived unannounced at Caleb's home in Willow Creek. He looked older. His suit hung loose. His eyes were shadowed with sleeplessness. Caleb met him at the porch, where wind chimes tinkled gently. "Can we talk?" Jackson asked. Caleb nodded. They sat side by side on the porch swing. The wooden slats groaned beneath their combined weight. Fireflies blinked in the gathering dusk. "You humiliated me," Jackson said finally. Caleb shook his head. "You humiliated yourself. I just refused to cover for it this time." Jackson's hands trembled as he lifted his coffee. "I lost everything." Caleb's voice was gentle. "I don't feel good about it. I never wanted to destroy you. I wanted to reach you." Jackson blinked, staring out at the quiet street. "I'm not keeping the Miami house," Caleb said. "It's in a trust. If you get your life together, it's yours, but not before." Jackson barked a short, bitter laugh, still trying to parent me. "No," Caleb replied softly. "I'm protecting my peace." Jackson's voice broke. "I've changed." Caleb stood. "Then you'll understand why we can't be close anymore." "I love you, Jackson, but I'm done sacrificing my sanity for your chaos." Jackson opened his mouth but found no words. Caleb gently squeezed his shoulder, then stepped inside and closed the door, leaving Jackson alone with the wind and the hum of cicadas. Epilogue. The Miami house was never reclaimed. Jackson moved to Arizona, started a small firm, and tried to keep his name out of the news. Caleb thrived in Willow Creek. His chess team won state. Students dropped by years later to thank him for changing their lives. Whenever someone asked about his brother, Caleb would smile faintly and say, "Family is important, but boundaries, they're everything."